Pope Francis showed a brief and uncharacteristic flash of temper amid the crowds at the end of his visit to Mexico. He was seen scolding people who'd reached out and grabbed him in such a way that he was tipped forwards. Some accounts say he landed on a boy in a wheelchair, others say it was a wheelchair-bound man. The Pope is in the world's second most populous Catholic country for a 5-day trip, during which he's visited some of Mexico's most troubled areas and urged Mexicans to reject corruption and provide true justice. Anne Barker reports.
It was uncharacteristic anger for a man admired for his public warmth. As he greeted crowds at a stadium, Pope Francis was pulled so hard he fell onto a man in a wheelchair. His words were drowned out by the music, but he was seen scolding those responsible and shouting, "Don't be selfish." But the Pope quickly recovered and placed his hand on the man's head. The Vatican later said it was a normal human reaction. There was in fact a far smoother reception when he visited a jail. Prisoners sang for him when the Pope arrived at one of Mexico's most violent prisons. 20 inmates died here during a riot between prison gangs in 2009. But prisoners were on their best behaviour as the Pope urged them to look for a better future.
Cuenten su experiencia. Ayuden a frenar el círculo de la violencia y la exclusión.
Tell your experience, he said. Help put an end to this cycle of violence and exclusion. The one who has suffered the greatest pain and, we could say, has experienced hell can become a prophet in society. Work so that this society, which uses people and discards them, will not go on claiming victims. It was a similar theme when the Pope addressed workers and business leaders at a college in the border city of Juarez, one of the most violent cities in Mexico and once regarded as the world's murder capital. One of the greatest scourges for young people is the lack of opportunities for study and for sustainable and profitable work, he said, which would permit them to work for the future. In many cases, this lack of opportunity leads to situations of poverty. This poverty then becomes the best breeding ground for the young to fall into the cycle of drug trafficking and violence. Indeed, the Pope's visit to Mexico has focused entirely on the injustices facing the poor, vulnerable and those marginalised from society. Many Mexicans, especially in Juarez, fall into drugs and crime. Others risk their lives trying to migrate north to the US, where lawmakers regularly debate whether to deport them. At the border near Texas, a notoriously violent place, Pope Francis met Mexican families separated from relatives by the border fence. We're here representing border law plus human rights. Plus, we want to bring a message to the Pope that all immigrants have rights and have dreams that must be fulfilled, said Patricia Espino from the organisation Border Network of Human Rights. It's estimated 11 million Mexicans have slipped into the US undocumented. US President Barack Obama has proposed reforms to ease the threat of deportation and allow Mexicans living there illegally to visit family back home. But as the debate stalls, the number of deportations is increasing. The Pope's visit is seen by many as criticism of anti-immigrant policies, especially among presidential candidates. And families at the border were hoping the Pope's visit might force a change of heart. Pope Francis finished his visit with a huge open-air mass at a fairground near the border, where 450,000 Mexicans gathered and Americans across the fence were able to watch.
Anne